Hi there, it's Rossie Stone here from Dekko Comics Limited, and I'm here again with another video for the At Home with Dyslexia Scotland series. And in this video, I'm going to be teaching you a load of fun study techniques that you can apply, whether you're at school or you're teaching someone who's at school, or you're just helping them. Maybe you're a parent or a support teacher, or maybe you're someone who needs help with your homework or revision. But either way, this is going to be the video for you. It's going to be a little bit longer so that I can show you as many of these techniques as possible in the time that we have. And if you've seen some of my previous videos on the Dekko technique, you'll have seen a couple of these examples already, how you can use drawing in a simple way to help you with study techniques and make them not just more fun, but by making them more fun, more effective as well. So I will be going over some drawing techniques in this video, but I will be talking about other things that don't require drawing, but I'll be showing you them through drawing. Now, due to a previous technology issue, you will not be seeing my face, but I will be showing you all the images and examples, so you can focus on those instead. So without further ado, let's get into the fun study techniques using the Dekko technique. Now, the Dekko technique is all about turning information into entertainment, into some sort of fun. But it's about finding what you enjoy and what you're good at. You know, whenever wanting to use this for yourself, keep that in mind throughout this video. What do you, or what does the person you're trying to help enjoy, and what are they good at? Because if you can tap into that, if you can study in a way that utilizes that, all the skills and all the passion and enjoyment that comes from that hobby can be utilized for the purposes of study. Because all the information we study is perfectly interesting, but sometimes the way we study it is what puts us off. You know, a big wordy worksheet, or a textbook that's very dry, or just it only uses words, it doesn't use anything else to grab our attention. And if we're not good at reading, or if we don't feel we're good at reading and absorbing information that way, it's always going to be a chore and an effort, and we're always going to think we're not very good at it, and thus that's not going to help us do any better. So here's some ways in which you can use hobbies and activities and generally more fun-based things to make studying a more effective experience. So for example, bear with me. There you go. So, for example, let's say you liked drawing, and let's say you were into these, what's quite popular at the moment, these collections of monsters, you know, Pokemon being the obvious example. What if you liked playing those sorts of games or watching those kind of shows, and you liked the idea of making your own? I say this to use as if you're someone who's studying this, but if you're helping someone who's studying, this is the kind of mindset you can start to get into. So let's say you wanted to let's say you're struggling with the 8 times table. Well, one of the things I teach in many of my workshops is how you can make a little set of monsters out of the 8 times table, turn that into a little fun activity, and suddenly the 8 times table can become very fun and memorable. So for example, I've made a little monster here to remind me of the answer to 8 times 1. You know, obviously that's a very easy one, but it shows you where you can start. 8 times 1, fire-tailed tongue. I made a little fiery monster with a big long tail, which is in his name. He's got 8 spots in his tail. He's got an 8 written on his belly, and he's kind of like a very cheeky gremlin-like monster with his tongue sticking out. Again, that's in the name. He's very fiery. It's very easy to remember, very distinct, and you know, that's a lot easier to remember, particularly if you're a visual thinker like I am. So 8 times 1, fire-tailed tongue. The name rhymes as well, it has a rhythm. And then for the next monster in that collection, you might want to make a completely different one. Like 8 times 2 equals 16. You could have 8 times 2, water bubble glue. Again, that rhymes with 8 times 2, and this monster has a big watery 16 on his belly. He's got 16 bubbles surrounding him. You know, he's a lot different from the previous monster. He looks very lazy, kind of goofy, and he's a completely different element as well. And you can see how, as the 8 times table would progress, you'd have a different monster for each one. Now you could do a thing where you can keep them all fire themed, and each fiery monster gets different throughout the times table, or make them all water themed and vice versa, or you can do one like I've been doing here where each monster is completely different. But by making them different and distinct from each other, it helps give you that visual aid to remembering those different answers. So that's just a little example of how you can remember facts by having a little character or monster represent each one, and that's a particularly good study technique if you like drawing and if you like those kind of things in pop culture. Next, I want to show you, again, you would have seen this in a previous video, the comic strip technique, but I just want to go over a bit more of it with you. In my previous video, I did it about verbs, and this time I've done it about nouns, verbs, and adjectives. And the reason I'm showing it again is because it is such an effective technique, because making a short stick figure comic strip out of it does not require any drawing skill, really. Stick figures are very useful tools because they don't require much they don't require much effort to draw, and yet you can use them to communicate all kinds of ideas and scenarios. So, for example, here I've got the top hat stick man saying, "What's a noun?" And then in the next box, the spiky hair guy says, "An elephant is a noun." Notice how I've used color coding as well. That's always popular in studies. It's always helpful, particularly for dyslexia. And so I've got all nouns represented in blue, for example. And in this second box, he thinks of an elephant in his thought bubble. And I thought that was quite an imaginative way of showing what a noun could be. And then the top hat guy looks up at the thought bubble as if he can actually see it and says, "Wow, what's a verb then?" And then in the next panel, panel 3, and the spiky hair guy says falling, and the elephant sort of falls out of the thought bubble and squashes the poor top hat guy in this sort of cartoony world. And I like that because it's sort of imaginative. It's kind of an interesting idea for me, thinking of an elephant and then the elephant actually popping out of the thought bubble and landing on the person. And it's kind of funny for me as well. So in the next panel, the elephant's kind of gone to sleep. He's comfortable, but the poor top hat man says, "This is not comfortable for him," as he's underneath the weight of the elephant. And then the spiky hair guy says, "Ah, that there is an adjective." And there you go. Like, it's giving you 4 examples, well, sort of 3 examples, but in 4 boxes, of these different uses of parts of speech, nouns, verbs, and adjectives. And it's not just giving you words and to learn them by, it's giving you pictures, story, and jokes to learn about them all by and remember them all by. But it's also giving you context. For example, when the elephant is falling, it's not just giving you an example of a verb, it's giving you the context of how you could use that verb in a funny way. And making this short, very short comic strip story was very easy. It was done in a very short space of time. And you can make a whole collection of these 4-box comics for yourself to remember all kinds of facts. And you can have great fun thinking of the funny scenarios and the points of the story and the different characters and the different ways you can use the things you need to learn. That really turns studying into a fun activity game. So you can use that for anything. English is a great example, but you can use it for all sorts of things. But always keep the focus. That is the core of the Dekko technique, is make it entertaining before educational. Focus on the fun part first. So before I move on from the drawing technique, I just want to show a couple of other ways where even if you don't have drawing skill or you get no enjoyment from drawing actual images, but you might like color and you might like doodling and making little shapes, you can still use that to your advantage. Often doodling and coloring little things in on the textbook is usually something we do when we're bored or distracted. But what if you utilize that for the benefits of your studies? So, for example, you could have the sentence of a fact here: the Victorian age was in the 1800s. I've chosen a very simple fact there, just to demonstrate. But what you can then do with that is suddenly write the same fact there, but use color and shapes. So in the first example, I've got the Victorian age was in the 1800s in a fluffy cloud thing with stars and swirls around it. And that just makes it look a lot prettier, more appealing. It puts in what someone might like about colors and shapes. And it's a lot more fun to write down, and it's a lot more fun to look at, and a lot more distinct and easier to remember than just a sentence. To the right of it, you can see I've also done a little factory with the 1800s written inside it. And that's an example of how, with a very simple drawing of a factory, if a factory is what reminds you of the Victorian age, then you don't even need to write the rest of the sentence. Just write 1800s inside it, and the visual tells you the rest of the information. That could be another very useful way of using simple visuals to help you remember things in a more fun way if you enjoy drawing to at least a certain degree. Um, and below that, I've shown how you can do it for things like spelling. Take the word naughty, for example, by writing that in a different color. Even that makes it slightly more interesting than if it was just written normally in black and white. Or writing it, you can give yourself a task where you have to write the word you're trying to spell in 3 different ways, but each way has to be as creative and as different as possible. So I've done one where I've just surrounded it with red shapes and swirls and stuff, just because I really like circles. I've done another one below that where I've just did a couple of swirls around the word. I did naughty like it was a flowing piece of river, and I just sort of therapeutically drew over those lines again and again. It was kind of relaxing, it was kind of nice, and it just made me kept me looking at the word again and again and again, and that can be a nice way of using doodling to help you memorize a word as well. And then to the left of that, I only did the first 3 letters, just to show you what I mean, but you could write the letters in block capitals and then do patterns inside them, and that way you're looking at each letter individually, bit by bit, and you can't help but get used to how that word is spelled. So yeah, simple doodling and colouring can be useful as well. Now, moving on to things that aren't drawing related, but I've used drawings just to show you what I mean, and I've kept them very simple, but here is an example of how you can use something like sports to help you with your studies. Let's say drawing wasn't really your thing, but playing football was, and you loved playing penalty shootouts at home. Well, what if you had, let's say if you were revising for a test or an exam, and you had some questions that you needed to ask yourself or get a parent to ask yourself in order to prepare for the exam. Well, you could do a thing where you do penalty shootouts, but every time you score, you don't get the point unless you could answer the question that the goalie shouts out. Or maybe you don't even have a goalie. Maybe you're just playing it with a friend or who has the same exam, or a brother or a sister or a parent, and you're both challenging each other, and if they score, you get to ask them a question of your studies, but that turns it into a game of penalty shootouts where suddenly getting a question gives you a point and it's become part of the game, and the football comes first. You're still having fun with the football, but it's motivating you and helping you to take on your studies. And that's not about replacing your football time with study time or tainting it with study time. It's about bringing your football time into your studies. You'll still play football for fun, but if you can find a way to study and help yourself learn by motivating yourself through football, it can be really powerful. To the right, circled in blue, I've done another example where you can do keepy-ups to help you with something like spelling. Let's say you had to spell a word. Well, what if for every keepy-up you did, you had to say a letter of the word, and if you got it wrong, then you'd have to start again. So it would be, for every keepy-up, if you were trying to spell the word spelling, it would be Spelling, 8 keepy-ups. While saying the letter at each time your knee hits the ball. And that's another fun way to make it into a fun challenge while using football. And you can do a thing even where you start off with an easy word, and then you have a medium word, a word of medium difficulty, and then after that you go for the gold, and you have one of the hardest words for you to spell that you've been trying to master. And if you can accomplish all 3, you give yourself a prize or something like that. There's no end to the possibilities of what you can do with that. So lots of things you can do with sports, football just being one example, but also with music. Let's say you're really into music. I used music for some of my studies. I used music to help me with learning my Shakespeare quotes. Shakespeare quotes were very hard for me to remember, and I really didn't like having to learn them. It just felt like I was saying a sentence again and again in my mind until it stayed there, and that was easier said than done. But what if you sang it to a song, to the tune of a song that you liked, or that you found catchy? Notice how I give both options there. You can use one you like, or just use the tune of something that you find really catchy and can't get out of your head. So for example, though it shames me to say, Baby Shark is not a song that I would love, but it's a song that I can't get out of my head whenever I hear it. And so what if I was wanting to learn a quote of "Full of scorpions is my mind"? That's from Macbeth. What if suddenly I started to apply that quote to a tune of full of scorpions, is my mind, full of scorpions, is my mind. Please forgive me. But that suddenly makes the sentence a lot more catchy and very hard to get out of your head now. And you can use the benefit of the tune's memorability to help you remember that sentence or that fact or whatever you wanted to use it for. Let's take another example. Let's take Frozen, for example, with Elsa, that big popular song Let It Go. Let's say you were wanting to use that for your times tables. So what if you did something simple like 12 times 1 equals 12, 12 times 2 equals 24, 12 times 3 equals 36, and so on. You can see how that would work. If that was a song that you liked or you would find helpful, you can use that for remembering all kinds of facts as well. And simply, again, referring back to the Dekko technique, it's about using more than words. And when you use music, suddenly you're not just using words to help yourself remember something, you're using tune and music and rhythm and all the things that come with that as well. So music is memorable for a reason. Use it to your advantage. Next, or I should say finally, I want to round it off with a few extra examples of how you can do it with other things. So sports and music are quite obvious examples, but you can use this with everything. Let's say you didn't like drawing, but you loved writing stories. Well, why not write a story? Let's say if you're wanting to remember chemical reactions. Well, you could write a story, for a chemistry exam, I mean. You could write a story about a girl who gains the mysterious power that whenever she touches something, she causes a chemical reaction within what she touches. So, for example, when she's in a bad mood, she'll touch a piece of wood and it might go on fire. Burning is a chemical reaction. And when she's in a sad mood, she might touch a piece of wood or any other object and it might freeze. Freezing is another chemical reaction. And you can make an interesting story based around that. Or if you needed help with your spelling, you could write a story about a boy who meets a talking whale and he has to teach the whale lots of different words in order to get the whale talking more and being able to express what the whale thinks. It can even have a funny bit in it where the boy tries to teach the whale all sorts of rude words as well. But if you wanted to do that, and if you didn't like writing, you can maybe get someone else to write it for you, but your only challenge is you've got to write all the words that you need to learn for your spelling, and that suddenly engages you. If you really like telling stories, that engages you from a storyteller perspective and makes you want to take on the studies because it means you'll get to tell a great story by the end of it. And it's very helpful for showing to other people as well. That would be a very useful thing to show to other people once that story is written. Another example is cooking. Let's say you loved cooking, and you love baking in particular. Well, what if you got all your ingredients together, and again, if you had some questions that you needed someone to ask you and you needed to answer them correctly, and that was the way you were going to prepare for your exam, well, you could do a thing where each cooking ingredient represented a question, and you weren't allowed to put it into the mixing bowl until you answered it correctly. And if you didn't get it right, you just have to answer a different one correctly or go back and answer that one correctly. You answer that one again and again until you got it correct. Then when it came to mixing, you could give yourself a challenge for if you have to mix it for like 30 seconds or a minute. You could give yourself a challenge where you have to answer as many questions correctly while you're mixing it. And then after that, when it's ready to put into the oven, you can have a break. And then when you come back and the cakes are ready, these are study cakes, so you wouldn't allow yourself to eat one until you could answer the questions that you were asked in the first place again correctly. And suddenly you've turned your cooking and your baking into a fun study technique and a very rewarding one as well, because you get cakes at the end of it. So that can be really fun as well. And finally, computer games. Computer games are obviously really popular. Minecraft is a very popular one. What if you made a Minecraft obstacle course, one where you could get gold and treasure chests along the way? But you wouldn't allow yourself to, the obstacle course would be about getting from one point to another, but you wouldn't allow yourself the point unless you could answer a question by the time you got to that point. So let's say you could even have it as like 2 chests were at different points of the obstacle course. You know, you'd get to one point and there'd be 2 chests there, and if you got it right, you'd get 1 item. If you got it wrong, you'd get an item from the different chest. Or you could do a thing where you go along the obstacle course and you have to answer questions rightly at different points, and if you get 3 wrong, you have to fall off the platform and go into a lava pit or something. You know, whatever it is, you know. But if you enjoy making obstacle course challenges in Minecraft or other kinds of mini games, why not use those as study techniques? You know, because you'll find everything you enjoy and love about Minecraft can be used for the purposes of your studies, and you'll find it a lot more helpful and beneficial. But there you go. That is a big brainstorm for you about things you can do to improve your study engagement and to use what you love and what you're good at to be good at your studies. I'm out of time for now, but if you enjoyed that, please go to dekkocomics.com and you can find resources that we make with the Dekko technique to help with studies and learning different things. And you can also find, you know, if you enjoyed this workshop and you want to have more of these study techniques, there's also a page where you can go to for workshops where you can see me talk more about this. Thank you very much for having me, and good luck in lockdown, and I hope this helps. All the best.